Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 4,508 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. Another 100 subs. We are at the 4,500 mark. Unbelievable. Thank you guys so much. We are back on the Nintendo Switch this week after a week hiatus, and we got some good ones we're looking at this week. As always, I try not to spoil anything, though I found that some people's definition of spoilers is different than my own, so be warned. Though I don't really say anything that's not a selling point, in my opinion. But let's take a look at 10 Switch games. If that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, the first game we're going to talk about this week is a bit of an oddity. It is actually the third dang time I have bought this game. Originally came out on the Wii U. It was an early release on the Switch. And then they announced a bunch of DLC for it that I did not ever think would be on disc. Lo and behold, I did a search. They did release an edition that had the DLC on disc. And you got to be careful because it has to say waves 1 through 6 on the back, not 1 through 5. And that is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and the bonus content. Now, finding this can be a little dicey. It does run about $80, which is steep. Though for myself, I just really wanted to have a copy that had the DLC on it. I'm sure they'll release Mario Kart 8 again on the Switch too, and then I'll regret it. But this has all 6 waves of the DLC, and just to confirm, it'll say waves 1 through 6 DLC. Now, there are some out there that will have 1 through 5, and then the wave 6 DLC will be a voucher. Not the point I'm doing. And there is a website that looks shady as hell that says you can buy from it. Or I got mine on eBay, so I likely bought it off someone who bought off that website. But yeah, there's not too much information out there about this, but it has all of the DLC, which is crazy. There are so many courses on Mario Kart 8, and I went through and I played through every single one of them. I actually really enjoyed it. You know, Mario Kart 8 and myself are not the biggest fans. I really dislike how they removed the horizontal split screen with vertical split screen, and my peripheral just gets all wonky as hell whenever I play it. But going through and checking out the levels, and also the entirety of Mario Kart Tour basically is in that DLC. Did not remaster enough GameCube, N64, and Super Nintendo levels, in my opinion. But what are you going to do? There's fans of the Wii and the 3DS and the DS version. But just really cool to have, and something that I was on the fence about, but I definitely am glad I picked it up. And I just have a feeling that one, especially if they don't end up re-releasing that on the Switch 2, is going to be very, very sought after at some point down the road when you can't buy those extra levels. Now, moving on to the next one is another game by Supergiant Games, which is one of my favorite indie developers. They made Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and then their biggest success was Hades. This was my game of the year. I want to say in 2020. It originally was announced in 2018. It was an early access for PC development, which I was not a huge fan of. And then I think it came out to either the PlayStation or the Xbox first, but I waited to get it on the Switch. Absolutely loved it. It is a roguelike game where it actually makes sense that it's a roguelike game. So you play as Hades' unknown son, Zagreus, and your whole goal is trying to bust out of the underworld so that you can be with your mother. I think it's Persephone. My Greek myth, I'm not completely all there. But yes, because Hades and Persephone are married, or it's Penelope. And so you are trying to escape the underworld to be with your mother and vice versa. And there's 4 different levels kind of the underworld. There's Tartarus, Asphodel, Elysium, and then the very top And this game gets pretty brutally hard. Like the third, each one of the zones has a boss fight, and especially the third boss fight is pretty damn tough until you get to the absolute surface. And it's one of those games where if you beat it, if you get to the surface the first time, you actually have to get to the surface 9 additional times to get the quote-unquote true ending. Each run is a little different. You can get imbued by the different gods, either not Apollo, but he's the one who's not in it, but Dionysus, Demeter, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Zeus, all that kind of good stuff, on your way to escape the underworld and defeat Hades, your dad, who, spoilers, is the guy standing between you and getting out of the underworld. Every time you die, it makes sense. So you respawn back in the underworld, you progress a little bit. Like, it's one of the most, it's probably the peak, I would say, of this type of game design. I know we've been getting, in recent years, a little long in the tooth with this style, but if you're interested in a roguelike game where you actually are making meaningful progression, even on a run where you do poorly, there's tons of different play styles. You can play with a projectile weapon, you can play with hand-to-hand combat, swords. I managed to escape the underworld using many of the different methods. In fact, one of the ones I found to be the most, one of the easiest ones was the projectile weapon, which generally in these type of games, the projectile weapon sucks. Very cool game, highly recommend it. It's on every system. Just one that I double dipped on. This is a sealed game because I had already bought it download only. But when it came out physically, I think for like $20, I had to pick it up. Now this is another game that I have sealed. It came out. It was recommended by my buddy Avalanche Jared, and it's a survival horror 16-bit type game, and that is called Signalis. So this was getting super expensive. They did a reprint of it, came down a little bit, and now I guess the company went out of business, or there's no more, like they're done as far as that goes, and now the price on this is going up and up across the board on every system now. So if you're interested in 16-bit survival horror akin to the original Resident Evil type games, that is one that is going to appeal to you. I know it appealed to me. Now, I've yet to play it, but it just looked very cool. I saw, like I said, I saw my buddy Jared do a brief video about it, and it just looked so interesting. I think you're in this kind of future tech world where you don't know quite what's happening. There's some evil force, and yeah, you're just dropped in there and you got to figure it out. So let me know, is that a game I should put up in my backlog? I probably will crack that open at some point this year. We'll see, but it looks very good, and it is skyrocketing. Like the last I checked, when when the reprint came out, it got up around $100, and now it seems like it's back up around $100. And apparently the Humble Games, they went out of business. At least that's what I've heard. But yeah, that's one to check out. Now this is a game I picked up because I'm a fan of video game history. I have never had a CDI, but the thing that the CDI is known for is that it has these horrible licensed Nintendo properties not made by Nintendo. So you have Hotel Mario, and then you have 3 Zelda games, the Wand of Gamelon, all these, like, just to have this really bad cutscene graphic art on it and really bad acting. And so you wouldn't think that would be the grounds of a spiritual successor or someone trying to emulate that style, but don't tell that to Arette, the Jewel of Faramore. And so in this game, it clearly is a take on those CDI Zelda games. They kickstarted it, I believe, and they said in there that's what they were doing. And to the level that they succeeded is kind of impressive. It looks just like the art style, looks and sounds like it, but the acting is cheesy, but still just, not as grating and as bad, but like you're in on the joke. And the moving through the levels is not great. Don't get me wrong. This is not a banger experience, but it is a very interesting one. And going through the levels, you kind of have a 2D platformer. To be honest, I was hoping I would enjoy it more than I have. So outside of the joke, I don't know if I really appreciate this game all that much, but it is one of those ones that's probably going to become pretty collectible just based on what it is. And it's kind of like they made a serviceable CDI game. That's more or less the gist of it. It's not great, but it's funny. It's funny. It's a play on that Zelda formula, which I enjoy. And so if that sounds interesting to you, that's one to keep an eye out for. It's on Switch. It's on other consoles too. I think there's a PS4 or PS5 version. All right, now this is an interesting one. I can't remember where I saw the recommendation for this, but it is called John Wick Hex. And it might have been on like a Metal Jesus Pickups video, him and Reggie. And with this game, you're playing as John Wick. Now, it's almost similar to that game Fights in Tight Spaces I talked about the other day. But in this game, you are playing as John, and you have to navigate through the different levels in sort of an XCOM style fight. So it is turn-based, but it's not turn-based card-based. It's more akin to XCOM, where you have a certain level, a certain amount of grenades or a certain amount of bullets before you have to reload. And so you go into these different fights, and you will take out all the enemies John Wick style, and then at the end of the level, you get the option to replay the level. And then it shows you in almost a cool action sequence like you would see in a John Wick movie of you going and taking out all the bad guys and all the various different moves. Something I always appreciate in these games. I think Fights in Tight Spaces had that. It reminds me of like how Super Meat Boy would do that, and it's always fun to see kind of in a fluid manner what your playthrough went and looked like. It's pretty short. There's not too much on the content front. You can upgrade different abilities, if I recall. It's been a while since I beat this game, but it was very cheap when I got it, like $10. I think it's still pretty damn cheap. And if you like XCOM style games, this is one to check out because it is very approachable, fun, and just, you know, who doesn't want to be John Wick? So there you go. That is one I definitely recommend. Now, another game I picked up because I kind of get looped into the hype, especially if something is, say, a sequel of a series that hasn't been around for a while, or is a sequel of a series that's very popular that maybe I didn't get my foot in, but I wanted to check it out. Similarly, this happened to me in the N64 era with Bomberman and Castlevania. Bomberman 64 was great. Castlevania 64, not so much. You know, I picked up Mega Man 11, even though I missed all the Mega Mans. Well, one of the games that I missed on the Xbox was Marvel Ultimate Alliance, so I picked up Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Famously, I've said it to death, I am just, you know, I might be the odd guy in the gaming sphere who is not into comic book stuff, but I am complete normie when it comes to this stuff. I like Spider-Man, I like Batman, and mainly I like those two guys because I like the villains. As far as superheroes go, I mean, I like the X-Men, I like Gambit, but I can't tell you. I remember one of the things that always used to annoy me when playing, say, Spider-Man Maximum Carnage or some of these other games is they would have people like Iron Man or Captain America or the Hulk or Black Sable, Doppelganger, like all these different characters that felt like I was expected to know who they were, but because I didn't know who they were, I got annoyed. Same thing like Fantastic Four popping up and all this and that. I'm just not that big a fan. And when I covered Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 on the Xbox 360, I had mentioned how I picked this up and I didn't really care for it. And I still feel that way. I just am not interested in... And also this is when Marvel was kind of on the downward slide post-Endgame, or really close to that, I want to say. Maybe it was right around the 2018, 2019. I don't know. I mean, Captain Marvel has the dude haircut, and I feel like that didn't happen. Maybe that happened in Endgame. I don't know. Like I say, I am not in this world. I just know that I did not care much for this game. Oh yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy. I could care less about Guardians of the Galaxy. That movie and franchise is so unbelievably popular now, but I don't care. I really don't. And I've watched the first one, and I really didn't get it. I really didn't get why people... That's how I feel with a lot of these movies. I don't know. Anyways, the game plays like a dungeon crawler group fight. You have 4 players always at the ready, and you start off as the Guardians of the Galaxy, so that didn't help. And it just, each one has, these remind me of Lego games. These remind me of the Lego games that I just don't enjoy playing it that much. I mean, maybe if you gave me guys like Spider-Man and all that, but Tom Holland's Spider-Man really killed my like of Spider-Man. I don't, once again, I grew up with the 94 Peter Parker who was out of high school. And yes, I understand Spider-Man started in high school, but Tom Holland just like, oh my God, like Toby managed to grow up. Tom just never did. Anyways, this game, I feel like I'm just talking about my dislike of Marvel. This game is okay for those who like it. It's gotten expensive. I don't think it had a very large print run, and it's still stuck on the Switch. How it never got put anywhere else, I don't know how Nintendo grabbed that one. But yeah, not one I'm a huge fan of. But if you guys like it, that's one that's going to keep going up, and you should probably grab before it's too late. Now, one that I am a huge fan of, and in fact, just a huge fan of this art style, the HD 2D series. I will get any of these games that come out in this way. I know people had said there's made too many of them. I think we've had 5 and 6 years or 5 and 7 years, something like that. Not nearly enough. I love every single one of them. This is the one that was trying to be the next Final Fantasy Tactics. While I think it missed the mark, it ended up being a lot more a Tactics Ogre. But that is Triangle Strategy. Now, Triangle Strategy's fatal flaw, in my opinion, is its ambition. They have this method they put in there where you can vote on what to do, as well as influence your different party members, like the different people on your council, of what they are going to do. On paper, this sounds great, but it really slows down the action to a crawl, to where you get into a rhythm of where, okay, there's a battle, then there's a deliberation, there's a research, and then there's a vote, and then there's a battle, and then there's a deliberation of it. And so you get this formulaic process where the combat in this game is staggeringly awesome. They really did a great job with it. The fact that you can set up combos by flanking enemies, the 3Dification of the HD 2D, at least to my eyes, made things look a little blurry, though that might have been partially the Switch's fault. But the choices you made actually did seem meaningful, much like Tactics Ogre. There are multiple endings, and they are drastically different depending on your actions. In this game, there are multiple endings that are drastically different depending on your actions. And there's 3 standard endings and then a 4th golden ending. I didn't actually get the golden ending, though I was super close to almost stumbling upon it. I just... as good as the combat was, my thoughts to go through and have those dragging scenarios where having people vote and do this and that, I wasn't interested in it, especially because in order to get the golden ending, you need to have certain people vote a certain way at the right time. Overall, though, phenomenal game, really good gameplay. The music, I can say, is pretty forgettable. I don't remember any great tracks, which was another disappointment in that, because the music in Octopath was so great, Live Alive is so great, the Final Fantasy Tactics. Triangle Strategy is probably the weakest of those games that, as far as soundtracks go. But just a phenomenal game in general, and one that you should check out, because it really is the farther I get away from it and the less games that have come out like this, the fonder I remember it. All right, one that I'm going to bring up just because I like the series. The sequel just was remastered on the Switch, which was a 3DS game, and I picked that up recently, but the one that was before that was Luigi's Mansion 3. So the big gimmick with this is that you can make a clone of Luigi, this goo Luigi, that I then believe could be a second player, or even, I think you can have up to 8 players. Like, there's something insane, like the couch co-op you can do in this. But it brought the series back to a more stable grounds. So the first Luigi's Mansion, you're in a mansion. The second one, you actually are in a hub world, and you go to mansions and complete missions, and then come back. It's a lot more structured as a handheld game, which I think was a disservice to the game. This one, you're back into a singular location, so you're in a hotel now, but the hotel is segmented by floors. So even though it's a singular location, floors 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it goes up to 13, 17. Each one of those, it distinctly is its own zone. And there's just nothing that's like the first one. I know that they've tried to make the game last longer, because the first Luigi's Mansion you can power through in a few hours, which I still to this day think is the best experience. Being able to get into the mansion, free roam, and collect the ghosts as you go, or in an order you like, or in an order that you discover, because when you would find a ghost, it would be like a puzzle, and then you just wouldn't know quite how to get to them until maybe you picked up a tip later in the game and then came back. In this one, it's very linear, as where you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this, you have to do that. There's a little bit of a valence at some regards, but not nearly the way that was in the first one that made it so enjoyable for myself. as well as time gating. A lot of these games will time gate things unnecessarily so, just so that you can't power through it as fast as you could, say, in Luigi's Mansion 1. But one I recommend picking up. It goes on sale sometimes for like $40, and Nintendo games will always keep their value, and it's just one that I would recommend picking up. Now, here's one that's not necessarily the right version to get, but I just wanted to talk about it just because it is an interesting history behind it, and that is the Axiom Verge Multiverse Edition. So if you can believe it, this was pre-ordered as a Wii U game. That's right, when Axiom Verge came out, I want to say in 2015, they finally got a physical version launched and pre-ordered, I want to say 2016, and I pre-ordered the Wii U version, but when the Switch came out, it was such an overwhelming success immediately, like just immediately. With Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like within that short time frame, it was, we got to pivot into something that's going to sell better. And I remember getting the email that said, hey, you have the Wii U, would you like to change it to the Switch, or you can switch it to Xbox or PlayStation. So I got the Switch version, but I'd already downloaded it and beaten it, because once again, this was another one of those games that got a digital-only release that I wanted to buy again if it got a physical one. And Axiom Verge was the big Metroidvania game, in my opinion, that really kicked off the indie renaissance after Axiom. I think it was made by one guy, Thomas Happ. After this game came out, that's when we got Hollow Knight, that's when we got Salt and Sanctuary, that's when we got all those other really intricate Metroidvanias that really took the ball and started running with it. The Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Kickstarter got kicked off. But yes, Axiom Verge, and then there is a sequel. Now, if you guys are looking for a version to pick up, this is not really that expensive too. It never really has been, because I think so many of us got this version, and it is sealed, though there's a tear on it, who cares. But there is a version, I believe now, that comes with Axiom Verge 1 and 2 physically, and I gotta tell you, I played Axiom Verge 2 back in 2020, I think it was, or 2021, and it had been years since I had played the first one, but it almost feels like 2 and 1 are in completely separate universes. Just the feel of it is so different, as well as in 2. It's a good game. I'll talk about it on this series at some point. But yeah, Axiom Verge 1 is still, in my opinion, the better game. It's got a better soundtrack, and it really evokes that Metroid feel. Because once again, Metroidvanias are mainly just Metroid games, but this is trying to be a Metroid game. And it's very, very cool, very fun. One I highly recommend, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. And then the last game we're going to talk about this week is actually the one that I have been actively playing this week, and that is Dave the Diver, the Anniversary Edition. When this game came out, I know there was some controversy because it nominated and won Indie Game of the Year, but I guess it's technically not an indie game. I'm not sure why. I haven't looked into it that much, but I'm sure it's a subsidiary of like a larger company. But yes, this game, I gotta tell you, this game I was a little on the fence about getting. It had almost a too much fervor behind it for me to want to get it, but I did pick it up when it was on sale for $20. And then when they got the Godzilla DLC around the same time Godzilla Minus One was coming out, which was free to download, though it is no longer available, so I hope you guys downloaded it. I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to check it out. More or less, the way this game plays is it has 2 phases. So you have a phase where you're going and collecting fish, and then there's the nighttime phase where you are serving sushi to customers. And it's very much a tertiary mobile game feel at sometimes with the way the mini games work. But there is a lot of content in this game, even deep into the game. There's 7 chapters, including a prologue and an epilogue. I'm in chapter 6, and I'm still unlocking new features to certain subsets of things you can have throughout the game. Because eventually you have a sushi restaurant, you're going to need to get ingredients like vegetables, rice. You'll have the ability to farm raise fish, like not getting too much into it, but yes, the main mechanic of you spend time going into the ocean, harvesting the fish, and then you have the restaurant where you can eventually hire waiters and cooks to make things go better. There's VIP guests that come, and it's also a very interesting kind of 16-bit art style, which someone who loves pixel art very much appeals to me. And the gameplay is deeper than you think, as well as the storyline. I would say it's akin to a show that starts off, it's a monster of the week, you know, a procedural, but then there's an overarching story that, say, around the third chapter starts taking over the game. So then the beginning where you're starting off doing just the getting fish, building it up, customizing your restaurant, earning money will change. And it does it change for the better? I don't know. Sometimes it feels like the overarching story is getting a little long-winded. Sometimes it's very engaging. There are boss fights that you'll eventually get into. There are you get the ability to have weapons underwater, and it's just a very cool designed game. It is a roguelike in theory, because when you go into the ocean every time, the water, like the area changes. But the way I like to think of it is, think of it like there's puzzle pieces. So there's the limestone cave, there's the depths, there's the area with the shark, there's the area with the ship. All those pieces will be present every time you jump into the water. It's just one time it might be on the left, one time it might be in the center, one time it might be on the right, one time the cave will be here, will be there. Like, so it's all the same components are always there. It's just the way you navigate through them is a little different, which is kind of a weak reason to have it be procedural generated like that, or not like changing like that, because it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But I digress. As well as the writing of the game, you're playing as Dave, the lovable overweight guy who, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like this is a problem with a lot of these indie games, is that one of the things, I don't know about you guys, but I like being the character who they're going to be, if they think they are cool, or if they think they are stupid, I would rather be the character who thinks they are cool. And in this game, you are basically an afterthought, even though you are responsible for getting all the fish, putting the menu together, hiring the staff, delivering the food, especially at the beginning, and then having people tell you like, oh yeah, we didn't even notice you were here. Were you here? That level of self-depreciation, yes, I appreciate that in people, but when I'm playing a game and I'm trying to cozy myself to the character, I don't need to be Mr. Egotistical, but I don't also need to be constantly cut down. And I think that's a problem that happens in a lot of these games. But it's not enough to ruin anything, and as the game progresses, it's not something that stays annoying like that. It's just, you have Boncha, who's so super cool. You have the guy who drives who owns the boat, who he thinks he's cool. He's kind of like the guy who thinks he's cool, but he's not really. But then your guy, who's just the lovable oaf, who's this gung-ho for everything and just constantly gets taken advantage of and, you know, is not really cared about. And that's who you play as. And it's just a trope that I'm not a huge fan of. But anyways, there are another 10 games you should pick up on the Switch before the prices go up. Thank you again for another great week. I know we've slowed down a little bit on the growth, but hey, we have skyrocketed so high that eventually things had to level off. Some interesting comments too. Someone said I look like Donald Glover. Not heard that one. Usually I don't. I wouldn't say I've gotten that one, but hey, thank you for the compliment. I'm assuming you mean the younger one, not the older one. But hey, they're both good-looking guys. But yes, just thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're going to ride the Switch wave for a bit, because I got a lot of Switch games. I still got some 360 to go through, and who knows? We got some PlayStation. We got all the systems here. So let me know what you guys are interested in. We'll try and get a look at that. But as always, I release a new video every Tuesday. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.